4 minutes and 37 seconds. That's exactly how long it took my dad to threaten to cut me out of his will. I still remember glancing down at the stopwatch on my phone when the call ended, then laughing so hard tears rolled down my face. Right then, I was sitting in my sunlit apartment in California where the afternoon light poured through the glass and stretched across the wooden floor. 3,000 miles away, my dad, the man who never once remembered my birthday, snapped at me, "If you don't show up to Daniel's party, don't expect to get a single dime from me." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. Part of me wanted to fire back right away, but another part found it funny. My whole life, he never cared where I was, what I was doing, or how I was living. And now, after 6 months of me disappearing from their lives, they suddenly noticed I wasn't there anymore. My mind drifted back to the day I left Boston. The apartment was stacked wall to wall with cardboard boxes. Not family heirlooms, not childhood keepsakes, just the things I'd bought and saved up for myself. In that moment, I knew I was packing an entire independent life. One that didn't need anyone watching or anyone's blessing. So when he threw that threat at me, I didn't feel the fear I used to as a kid. Instead, laughter spilled out, echoing through the empty room. It wasn't happy laughter. It was release. I realized the only power they still had over me was the illusion that I needed their approval. My heart raced, not from panic, but from something else. Freedom. Freedom from family dinners where every story circled back to Daniel. Freedom from my mom's blank stare whenever I tried to share an achievement. Freedom from the endless loop where my worth only existed in comparison to my brother. And in that moment, I felt something faint but certain. This phone call was just the beginning. I couldn't have known that in just a few weeks, my choice would throw Daniel's entire wedding into chaos. And every mask of the perfect family they had so carefully built would start to fall away. When my dad threw that threat at me, my mind flashed back 6 months earlier. I was standing in a cramped apartment on the edge of Boston. Cardboard boxes stacked high in the hallway, packing tape ripping with that sharp sound, like it was sealing off a whole chapter of my life. I bent down to lift a heavy box of books, but Caroline, my best friend from college, dropped it on the floor with a groan. "Rachel, this thing's so heavy I thought I was hauling the entire Harvard library. You really need all of these?" I gave a tired laugh, wiping sweat from my forehead. I already sold most of them, just kept the ones I couldn't let go of. "But thanks for helping, Caroline." She collapsed onto the old sofa, letting out a long breath. "I still can't believe you're actually doing this. Have you even told your parents yet?" My throat tightened instantly. I'd heard that question from so many people, and the answer was always the same. I let out a dry laugh that echoed through the half-empty room. "Caroline, they don't even know where I live. So why would I tell them I'm moving all the way to California?" Right then, Mark walked out of the kitchen, towel still in his hand. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes filled with both worry and curiosity. "But how does your family not know about this? They don't even ask?" I slid down onto the cold wooden floor, the chill seeping through my knees and up my spine. "It's not that they don't know," I said slowly. "It's that they never cared." Caroline and Mark exchanged an awkward glance. They'd heard bits and pieces about my family before, but never the full story. And in that last moment of packing, I suddenly wanted to spill it all, as if speaking it out loud was the only way to finally cut myself free. I remember being a kid, how the whole house seemed to orbit around Daniel, my brother. To my parents, he was the shining star. Me? Just a shadow. Even when I accomplished something, dinner still ended with a story about his soccer goal, not my certificate. Mark shook his head. "That's insane. No kid deserves to be treated like that." I peeled a strip of tape stuck to my hand and gave a bitter smile. "You're right. But that was my childhood." For a moment, none of us spoke. Only the ticking clock broke the silence. Outside, the Boston wind howled, tossing dry leaves against the window. I knew this was the last time I'd breathe in the musty air of that apartment. Caroline finally cut through the heaviness. "So, what happens after tomorrow? Do you have a plan?" I lifted my head and stared at the gray sky outside. The plane leaves at 2 in the afternoon. And from that moment on, everything in my life changes. And I felt it deep down. It wasn't just leaving Boston. It was leaving behind the role of the second child they'd cast me in all those years. Right after I said I was leaving, the air in that Boston apartment went heavy. Caroline stayed quiet, and Mark just gave a small nod. They knew this wasn't just a trip. It was the end of an era. I leaned back against the wall, and memories came rushing in. My childhood in that white-painted house on the edge of Massachusetts, where winters buried everything in snow and summers smelled like fresh-cut grass. For some kids, that would be a warm memory. For me, it always felt a little off balance. From the time I was a kid, everything revolved around Daniel. I started, my voice rough. He's only 2 years older, but to my parents, he glowed like a star. And me, I was just the backdrop. Caroline sat up straighter. What do you mean? I gave a small, bitter laugh and thought back to a night when I was 8. I'd just won first place at the school science fair. I built a working volcano model based on real research, not just the baking soda trick. My teacher even called my parents to tell them they should be proud. That night, I stood by the dinner table holding my certificate. I thought at least Mom would hug me or Dad would smile for real. But all they said was, "That's nice, honey." Then immediately turned to Daniel and went on and on about some pass he made at soccer practice. Saying it out loud made my chest ache. I remembered the weak yellow kitchen light and the way that certificate shook in my hands like it was about to hit the floor. Mark let out a long sigh. "God, that makes me mad for you." I shook my head and went on. "It just kept happening." By the time I was 12, I had straight A's. Always on the honor roll. My parents would glance at the report card, then set it aside. But when Daniel made varsity football, they threw an outdoor party. Dad even bought a brand new grill and invited the neighbors. Caroline frowned. "And you? They never did anything like that for you?" I let out a dry laugh. "No." I started to realize my achievements only mattered if they could make Daniel look better. Otherwise, I was invisible. The room fell silent for a moment. The only sound was Mark pulling tape across another box. It sliced the air like it was cutting into me. I lowered my voice. The worst was when I turned 18. Daniel said he wanted to go to this prestigious private school. Super expensive. My parents were over the moon, promised to cover everything: tuition, apartment, spending money. A few months later, they sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "We've used up all the savings for your brother. You're on your own." Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. Mark blurted out, "No way." "But it's true," I said. I didn't cry. I just sat there like someone had erased my name from the family. They didn't apologize, didn't explain. I just wasn't worth the investment. Even now, my throat tightened telling it. A chill ran down my spine. But I took a deep breath. Because of that, I hunted for scholarships, worked 2 jobs at once. I learned to depend on myself. But the feeling of being left behind, that never really went away. Caroline stood up and wrapped her arms around me. The soft scent of her hair made me close my eyes. In that hug, I felt something I'd been missing all my life: recognition. In that moment, I knew my childhood had given me a harsh lesson: not every family is a safe place. And if I wanted to really live, I had to carve out a different path of my own. Right after I shared those childhood memories, I sat still for a long time. But inside, scenes from my college years started to surface, sharp and vivid. It was a time that was both bitter and a turning point: the moment I realized my own worth. The day I graduated high school, I already knew. My family wouldn't give me a single cent. Daniel was different. My parents carried his bags into a private college dorm, promised to send him spending money every month. Me? I had one old suitcase, a few clothes, and a thin hope that my full scholarship would be enough to keep me afloat. I remember that first afternoon in my state school dorm, a cramped room with 2 bunk beds and cold white walls. My new roommate walked in, immediately FaceTimed her parents, and they asked her about everything. "How's the room? Are you eating okay?" I sat just a few steps away, clutching my suitcase, my throat tight. No one called me. Those first months were a grind. Classes by day. Nights waiting tables at a diner where the smell of grease clung to my hair and clothes. Weekends working the night shift at the library, checking books and wiping down tables. One evening, Caroline, she was at a nearby school, then called while I was slurping cheap ramen. "Rachel, are you okay?" she asked. I laughed, my voice rough. "I'm fine. Just deciding whether to buy my textbooks or a real meal." She went quiet for a few seconds, then whispered, "You don't deserve this." But deep down I knew this was the only way to survive. There were winter nights in New England when the wind screamed through the cracks, and I curled up under a thin blanket, heart racing with worry and exhaustion. Yet strangely, I also felt a tiny flame burning inside me. A voice whispering, "If you survive this, you'll be stronger than anyone." When the first report cards came back, all A's, I held it in my hands, feeling both proud and sad. Proud I'd proven myself. Sad no one at home cared enough to hear. I tried once. I called my mom and said, "Mom, I just got a 4.0 GPA. On the other end, her voice was flat. "Oh, that's nice. Hey, did you hear Daniel made the starting lineup? We're all flying out to his opening game next week." In that moment, a cold, sharp ache ran down my spine. I bit my lip hard, holding back a sound I didn't want her to hear. After that call, I swore I'd never look for their approval again. Little by little, I built a new circle: classmates, co-workers at the diner, strangers who'd pat my shoulder when they saw me asleep over my books. They weren't Morgans by blood, but they made me feel seen. Mark, he was a mutual friend of Caroline's back then, once told me something I've never forgotten. "Rachel, you don't need anyone's permission to shine. You're already doing it." Those words lit up a dark place inside me. For years of college passed. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. My family sent a few short texts, "Happy birthday." No calls. No cards. Not even a small gift. I slowly accepted that, to them, I was just a name on a birth certificate. But those years built my resilience. I learned how to hustle, how to stand on my own, how to look in the mirror each morning and tell myself, "I'm enough," even if no one else says so. When I put on my navy cap and gown, I looked around the hall. Somewhere, Daniel was probably in another perfect family photo on Mom's social media. And me, standing among my classmates, gripping my diploma. No parents by my side, but for the first time, I didn't feel lacking. I knew this was the real beginning. After graduation, I learned something big. Blood doesn't always equal family. Caroline and Mark had been proving that to me for years, little by little, just by showing up in moments that felt small but meant everything. One winter night in my second year of college, snow piled high outside and icy wind slapped against the dorm windows. I sat at my desk, hands trembling after a night shift while trying to finish a programming assignment. My eyes blurred. My head throbbed. Then my phone rang. It was Caroline. "Rachel, are you still up?" Her voice was full of worry. I gave a weak laugh. "Yeah. I'm drowning in deadlines. Probably going to be up a few more hours." She didn't hesitate. "No. Come downstairs. Right now." I brought hot coffee and sandwiches. When I walked down, Caroline was there in her thick coat, holding a steaming bag of food. She didn't say much, just shoved a paper cup into my hands. "Drink before you pass out." In that moment, under the yellow glow of the lobby lights, with snow swirling outside, I understood what it meant to be cared for. Mark was the same way. He wasn't a talker, but he noticed things. Once, when I was so stressed I thought about dropping a class because the professor was brutal, Mark sat with me for hours in the library. He didn't lecture me. He just quietly translated page after page of material, then slid the notebook back to me. "Try again, Rachel. You're better than you think." Those few words stayed with me forever. When I decided to move to California, they were the first two people I told. Caroline cried, "I'm gonna miss you so bad." Mark smiled and patted my shoulder. "Go. More mountains, more sun. Maybe it'll suit you." That night, the three of us sat on the floor eating pizza in my empty apartment. No furniture, no decorations, just three people, one pizza box, and laughter echoing off the bare walls. I remember Caroline looking around and saying, "This place isn't home anymore, but we'll always be home for each other." My throat tightened. All I could do was nod. Thinking back, I realized something. Real family doesn't have to share your blood. They're the ones who see the pain you hide. The ones who sit with you at 2 a.m. just to make sure you don't fall apart. They never ask you to prove your worth because to them, you already are. Without Caroline and Mark, I don't know if I would have had the courage to step out of the shadow of my birth family. But because of them, I started to believe I deserved a fresh start. And California, the land of sun and new chances, was exactly where I was meant to begin again. The first day I set foot in San Jose, I walked out of the airport and looked up at the blazing blue sky. The air was dry, warm, and carried the scent of sunshine, nothing like Boston's cutting cold. In that moment, I whispered to myself, "Rachel, this is your new beginning." The apartment I rented was on the upper floor of an old building, but it had big windows facing the Santa Cruz Mountains. In the mornings, sunlight poured in and lit up the room. In the afternoons, I'd stand on the balcony and watch the sky fade from orange to purple. Every time I looked out, I felt freedom, something I'd never had in more than 20 years. The new job was more than I'd hoped for. On my very first day at a tech company in Palo Alto, my manager shook my hand firmly. "Rachel, we're excited about what you can bring." Those were words I'd never heard from my parents. Here, my ideas were heard and valued. When I pitched a new solution for the software system, the whole team clapped. That feeling, it was like finally finding a place where I belonged. One afternoon, while I was eating lunch in the cafeteria, Mark video called from Boston. He grinned. "Look at you. Just a few weeks and you're already different. California suits you." I laughed, raising my coffee cup. "Yeah, I feel like a whole new person." Caroline popped into the frame. "Don't forget us. Next time we fly out, you're taking us hiking." We all laughed. And in that laughter, I knew I was building a real family. But the person who moved me most was Grandma Margaret. One Friday afternoon, I called her to share the news about my new job. Her voice trembled with joy. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. You did all this with your own 2 hands." I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're the only one in the family who calls me." "I'm so grateful for that." She sighed softly. "I see it all, Rachel. I know how they've favored Daniel. I tried to talk to your father, but he wouldn't listen. So I stood by you in my own way." Hearing her words, my throat tightened. Warmth spread through my chest. For the first time, I felt truly seen by someone in my family. From that day on, whenever I hit a small milestone, I called her. A successful project, a new bit of savings, even just a nice dinner I'd cooked myself. She always listened, always celebrated. Things that might seem ordinary, but to me, they were priceless. Life began to fall into place. In the mornings, I brewed coffee and opened the windows to mountain air. At night, I jogged through quiet streets, feeling the cool ocean breeze drifting from the San Francisco Bay. Saturdays, I hiked with coworkers and stood on mountaintops looking down at the bright lights of Silicon Valley. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Caroline. "I just looked back at the photos of you moving out. You looked so exhausted then. You're different now. I'm proud of you, Rachel." I smiled, leaning my head against the wall, watching the city lights flicker like stars. In that moment, I realized I'd broken free of being the forgotten child. I wasn't Daniel's shadow anymore. I was me, and I was writing my own story. But what I didn't know was that just 6 months later, an unexpected call from my father would test everything I had built. One Tuesday morning, as California sunlight slipped through my blinds, my phone rang. A strange number lit up the screen. I almost hit decline, but for some reason I pressed answer. "Rachel." My dad's voice came through, dry, without even a hello. "This Saturday, you're coming home for dinner." The sound of him froze me for a beat. 6 months. It had been 6 months since the last time we spoke. And now, he appeared like nothing had happened. I frowned. Dinner for what? He shot back, flat and quick. Meet and greet. Emily's parents want to know the whole family before the wedding. They're traditional. They value family. You have to be there. I sat still, my fingers gripping the chair, arm tight. That commanding tone again, the one that used to make me feel like a little girl taking orders. But this time, I wasn't that kid anymore. I said it clearly. I'm not coming. Silence. Then his voice exploded. Not coming? What the hell do you mean? This is your brother. This is his future. You don't have the right to embarrass him. A laugh slipped out, echoing in my small apartment. I said it plain, Dad. I'm not going to that dinner. Rachel. His voice dropped low, sharp with anger.
Why?
Something inside me cracked open. Not anger, but relief. I said it straight. Because to you, family never included me. You had Daniel, the golden child. And you had me, the forgotten one. I don't owe anyone the role of the perfect sister for show. He paused, then snapped. Don't be disrespectful. Family is family. You have a duty to. I cut him off. My voice steady, cold. Dad, I've lived in California for 6 months. And not one person in the family even knew, because no one ever asked where I was. The silence this time was heavy, so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. Then he roared. You left without telling anyone? Give me your address right now. I laughed, asking quietly, do you even remember my old address? The one I lived at for 3 years? Another pause. Then he stumbled. Rachel, that's not the point. It is the point, I said firmly. You don't remember because you never cared. And because of that, I don't owe you my address. I hung up. My heart was racing, my hands trembling. But at the same time, my chest felt light, like I'd just cut loose an invisible rope that had tied me down for years. Right after, my phone lit up nonstop.
Dad.
Then Mom. Then Daniel. I didn't pick up. Messages flooded screen. Rachel, family matters. Don't be stubborn, Mom wrote. Daniel texted, come on, it's just one dinner. You can go back to California right after. I set the phone down, pulled a piece of salmon from the fridge, slid it into the oven. The soft crackling sound drowned out the constant buzzing. I smiled bitterly. Where were they when I was eating ramen in my dorm? Where were they when I worked 2 jobs just to pay rent? Nowhere. 3 days later, the calls still came. Please, promises, even threats. But I didn't move. I knew one thing for sure. If I gave in now, I'd slip right back into that old role, the invisible child, pulled out only when they needed a prop for their perfect family picture. In those moments, my heart pounded, my head felt strangely blank. But deep inside, I knew I'd just drawn a boundary. And once a boundary is set, I'll never step back again. That Saturday, instead of putting on a dress for the family dinner, I laced up my hiking boots and headed up a trail into the Santa Cruz Mountains. The sky was clear, the wind cool against my face. At the top of the ridge, I filled my lungs with freedom, while across the country, the Morgans were busy acting out their perfect family for the in-laws. Late that night, Grandma Margaret called. Her voice, as always, was warm. Sweetheart, do you have a minute? I want to tell you what happened tonight. I leaned on my balcony railing, gripping the phone. I can guess. They weren't happy I didn't show up, right? She sighed.
Not just unhappy. Panicked.
They told Emily's parents you were sick, then said you had to work, then claimed you were on a business trip. But Emily's parents didn't buy it. They asked straight out, if family is so important, why isn't your daughter here? I laughed, though inside it hurt in a way that almost felt satisfying. And then what? She continued slowly. They made their disappointment very clear. They said they'd heard how you'd been neglected all these years, how Daniel was always favored while you were barely mentioned. They didn't hold back. They said behavior like that made them question if this was really the kind of family they wanted their daughter marrying into. My heart pounded, but not with fear. It felt like vindication, like finally being seen. The rest of the night was tense, Grandma said. Your parents forced smiles, but their faces were stiff. Daniel was restless, kept glancing around like he was hoping you'd appear. Emily, you could see the sadness on her face. The air was heavy the whole night. I closed my eyes, picturing it. A fancy dining room, golden lights, a perfectly set table. But the room thick with awkwardness, twisted smiles, clumsy excuses. And right in the middle, Daniel the golden boy suddenly exposed and helpless. What about the wedding? I asked quietly. She sighed again. It was like a play falling apart. Emily's parents sat stiff and serious. Emily smiled, but her eyes were far away. Daniel was tense, kept checking his phone like he was waiting for a text from you. Guests whispered to each other. And when the minister spoke, the silence was so heavy I could hear people breathing. A sharp ache tugged at me. As much as I resented the favoritism, it hurt to picture Daniel's big day shadowed by cracks in the family. But right behind that came another feeling: relief. Because the truth had finally caught up with them. Grandma lowered her voice, almost like she didn't want anyone else to hear. You know, Emily's parents asked Daniel directly, "Why have you never mentioned your sister? Why isn't she part of your life?" His answer didn't satisfy anyone. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting toward the mountains. A laugh escaped, softer this time. They spent years building the perfect image, only to watch it crumble in days. That's fair, Grandma said gently. I don't like seeing the family divided, but I'm glad people finally see you for who you are. You deserve that, Rachel. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I wiped them away, forcing my voice steady.
Thank you, Grandma.
As long as you see me, that's enough. After the call, I opened my laptop and looked at the photos she'd sent. My parents, smiling stiffly, eyes full of worry. Daniel, head down, shoulders tight. Emily beside him, face heavy with sadness. And in the background, Emily's parents, cold and unimpressed. I closed the laptop and leaned back. No guilt, just certainty. I'd been right not to go back. My absence, not my presence, was what cracked their perfect family picture. In that moment, I realized I didn't have to do anything to get even. The truth had already done it for me. After that tense wedding, my phone lit up nonstop again. This time it wasn't just Dad or Mom, it was Daniel too, sending long messages one after another. Rachel, I know we messed up, but please at least talk to me. Don't stay silent anymore. I was wrong not to stand by you. I need you to help me fix things with Emily's family. I stared at the glowing screen, then hit delete. No reply. No explanation. The next day, Dad called. His voice tried to sound soft. Rachel, your mom and I have always been proud of you. Maybe we never showed it the right way. But now that you're successful, why don't we start over? A sharp laugh slipped out of me, cold and cutting. You only care because you think I add value to the family image. I'm not a prop for you to parade around. Then I hung up. 3 hours later, I blocked every old number. All of them. Dad, Mom, Daniel, even the distant relatives who barely called. I got a new number and gave it only to Caroline, Mark, and Grandma. When it was done, I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. My heart raced, but my chest felt light. For the first time in my life, I didn't owe my family a single appearance anymore. A month later, I signed the papers for my first home in California. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a little backyard with citrus trees. When I stepped into the empty house, afternoon sunlight poured through the big window, painting the wooden floor gold. I stood there, hand on the white wall. This is mine. My home. Caroline came to visit the next weekend. She walked through the door and gasped. Rachel, this place is amazing. You really did it. I smiled, showing her around. A guest room, already promised for Caroline and Mark whenever they visited. A small room turned into an office, desk facing the garden. And the kitchen, the heart of the house, where I cooked my first real dinner for myself. That evening, we sat on the porch eating pasta I'd made, listening to crickets in the warm air. Caroline raised her glass of wine against mine. To new beginnings. I lifted my glass, eyes stinging. To a life where I'm not just someone's shadow. Life slowly settled into peace. Days working from my home office, Projects running smoothly, coworkers respecting me. Weekends planting lavender along the fence, the scent drifting in the breeze. Sometimes Mark called on video, Caroline sent pictures from Boston. It all reminded me I did have a family, just not the one I was born into. One Sunday night, Grandma called. Her voice was gentle. "Sweetheart, are you doing all right?" I looked around my bright, cozy home and smiled. "I'm better than ever, Grandma. I've got a house, a job, friends. I don't need anything from them anymore." She paused before saying softly, "I'm glad you found peace. But I want you to know your parents regret it. They talk about you all the time." I let out a long breath. They don't regret because they love me. They regret because they lost control. I'm not going back. And in that moment, I knew without a doubt my choice was right. I'd built a boundary, and no one would ever cross it again. A year after moving to California, I sat on my porch, sipping my morning coffee. March sunlight stretched across the garden, where the little orange trees were starting to bloom. Sparrows chattered along the wooden fence, and I couldn't help but smile. My phone buzzed.
It was Grandma.
"Rachel, sweetheart, I just wanted to check in."
How are you?
I looked around my bright home, took a deep breath. "I'm better than ever, Grandma. Work's going great. My friends are amazing. I've got a house, a garden, and a peaceful life." Her voice was warm. "I'm so happy for you. You built all of this with your own hands." I smiled. I think I finally found where I belong. After the call, I sat quietly, letting my thoughts wander. Sometimes I wondered if my parents had been fairer, if they had noticed the little victories I had. Would my life have been different? Maybe I wouldn't have worked 2 jobs. Maybe I wouldn't have fought through those lonely nights in a dorm. Maybe I'd still be in Boston, still playing the role of the second child in a family that never really saw me. But then it hit me. Their neglect shaped me into who I am today. Every cheap ramen packet, every exhausting night shift, every painful comparison to Daniel, it all built the foundation that taught me how to stand tall. No one handed me this path. I carved it myself. And now, sitting in my own home, I knew I didn't need their recognition. I didn't need a late apology. They chose Daniel.
They forgot me. And I chose freedom.
I chose happiness. I remembered what Caroline whispered the last time we packed up my things. "This place isn't home anymore, but we'll always be home for each other." She was right. Family isn't just about DNA. It's about the people who truly see you, who listen, who stand by you when you need it most. I lifted my coffee cup, watching the sun rise higher over the mountains. A certainty washed over me. I wasn't going back to the past. No regrets. No guilt. Just living fully, right here in the present. And if someone asked me, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned from all of this?" I'd say this. Sometimes the greatest legacy parents leave you isn't money. It's the strength to build a life that's completely your own. And if you're listening to my story today, remember this: you deserve to be seen, to be valued, no matter who's overlooked you. Build your own family with love, with recognition, with true loyalty. If this story touches you, I hope you share it with someone who needs to hear they're enough. Because in the end, happiness doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from having the courage to live a life that's truly yours.